Well, good afternoon. My name is Rocky Moretti. Moretti is spelled M-O-R-E-T-T-I, and I'm the Director of Policy and Research with TRIP. TRIP is a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., supported by a coalition of manufacturing, insurance, construction, labor, and engineering organizations. We've been putting reports out for over 50 years, and every year we probably put out around 15 reports annually. Typically at the state level. We also do national reports looking at the condition of our transportation system, looking at its impact on the economy, looking at issues of reliability, and also looking at its impact on economic growth. This report takes a look at the latest data from New York. The format of the report is that after you hear from myself, we'll hear from the additional speakers, which I'll introduce in a moment. And then after you hear our comments, there'll be an opportunity for questions. And you can either through the message function or by raising a hand, just indicate that you have a question. Then my colleague, Carolyn Kelly, will facilitate question and answers. While you're asking questions, you'll be put on the panel so that you facilitate your ability to ask us questions. The other speakers today that we'll be hearing from after my comments are Seth Piccirillo, the Director of Economic Development for the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership, Elizabeth Carey, Director of Public Relations and Corporate Communications with AAA Western and Central New York. And then we also have two representatives of the Fair Apportionment of Infrastructure Revenues Committee. We have their co-chairs, Brad Byers and Ryan Forrestal, on the call, and Brad will be delivering some comments. And then at that point, we'll go ahead and move on with questions. So let's look at some of the key findings of the report. TRIP estimates that statewide cost to drivers in New York of traffic congestion, of rough roads, and also of the cost of serious traffic crashes in which a lack of adequate roadway safety features were a contributing factor, is $28 billion annually. TRIP estimates that the average cost of motorists in Buffalo of driving on rough roads, lost time due to traffic congestion, and the economic cost of traffic crashes in which the lack of roadway safety features were a contributing factor is $1,866 annually. The TRIP report estimates that the average cost of motorists in the Rochester area of driving on rough roads, losing time due to congestion, and the economic cost of traffic crashes in which the lack of roadway safety designs were a contributing factor is $1,747 annually. The report also took a look at some of the key components that support these additional costs. Statewide in New York, 26% of major roads are rated in poor condition, and another 19% are rated in mediocre condition. The report finds that in the Buffalo area, 14% of major roadways are rated in poor condition, and another 26% are rated in mediocre condition. In the Rochester area, the report finds that 12% of major roads are rated in poor condition, and 21% are rated in mediocre condition. The TRIP report took a look at bridge conditions and found across the state that 10% of bridges are rated structurally deficient. These are bridges in immediate need of repairs, reconstruction, in some cases replacement. The TRIP report found that in the Buffalo area, 9% of the region's bridges are rated structurally deficient and in immediate need of repairs, reconstruction, or replacement. In the Rochester area, the TRIP report found that 9% of bridges are rated structurally deficient and in need of repair, reconstruction, and in some cases replacement. We've been watching the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on transportation, and as you would anticipate, while we're seeing the nation and New York State and Western New York recovering from the COVID pandemic, it had a huge impact on transportation. In April, following the initial wave of the pandemic, vehicle travel in New York dropped by 45%. But by this October, travel in New York State had returned to within 8% of pre-pandemic level. This is having an impact on traffic congestion across the country. We're seeing traffic congestion return to some extent faster in the evening rush hours. but also starting to pick up in the morning and even somewhat in the middle part of the day. The TRIP report found that in the Buffalo area, that the average area motorist is spending an additional 48 hours annually stuck in traffic due to traffic congestion and wasting an additional 23 gallons of fuel due to traffic congestion. The TRIP report found that in the Rochester area, the average motorist is spending an additional 40 hours annually stuck in traffic and wasting an additional 20 gallons of fuel due to traffic congestion. Traffic safety is an absolutely critical factor across the country and certainly in New York State. And as we point out in the report, traffic safety is an issue both for the occupants of vehicles, but also for pedestrian and bicyclists. In fact, nearly a third of all traffic fatalities are of non-motors, of pedestrians and bicyclists. We know that when roadway safety improvements are made, everything from adding rumble strips to adding turn lanes to improving lighting, improving signing, using skid-resistant pavement surfaces on intersections or on curves, adding guardrails, improving the safety features of pedestrian and bicycle facilities. These all have a huge impact on improving traffic safety. And so we know that when we look at these alarming numbers of traffic fatalities, which also are accompanied by a significant number of serious injuries, life-changing injuries in many cases, that we can make the system far safer. The report found that for over the last 5 years, on average, 59 people annually are being killed in traffic crashes in Buffalo. The report found that in the Rochester area over the last 5 years, there's been an average of 72 traffic fatalities annually. So again, these are huge impacts on the public, and we know that we can make significant improvements when additional resources are made available. The report also points out the critical nature of the state's transportation system in terms of economic development and moving the state's economy. Every year, $1 trillion worth of goods are shipped to or from New York State, with the majority of those goods on trucks. And we know that over the next 25 years, that level of freight movement is anticipated to double. We've certainly seen through the pandemic an increased reliance by consumers as well as businesses for an increased volume of deliveries to the home or to people's businesses, again, putting more stress on the transportation system. The positive message that we can convey is that this significant need for reinvesting and reconstructing the state's transportation system is starting to attract additional dollars. Several reports recently have documented that as roads, highways, and bridges deteriorate and age, that oftentimes the simple repavings or repairs of bridges are having a shorter and shorter lifespan because increasingly these older components of our infrastructure system require more significant reconstruction to address issues with the subbase of a highway or the support columns of a bridge. And as these additional needs for reconstruction increase in New York State, certainly the need for investment increases. Fortunately, we've seen from the New York Department of Transportation a significant increase, a 37% increase over the last 3 years in their annual investment in roads, highways, and bridges. Some of that has gone to some significant mega projects across the state, but it also has provided additional resources for resurfacing and reconstructing major components of the state's transportation system. And then recently we saw the approval of the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that is going to increase the federal share or the federal investment in roads, highways, and bridges in New York State by 52%. And if you look at the federal program as being 38% of the overall state program, it gives you a sense of the additional resources that are starting to flow into the state. In conclusion, these additional resources are providing New York with an opportunity to begin to turn the ship on a lot of significant infrastructure challenges with its roads, highways, and bridges, but to continue to make progress in overall conditions and support economic growth and improve safety and reliability will require that the local and state governments continue to put a significant priority in investing on its transportation system. On that, I'll ask Seth to provide his comments.
Thank you so much. Happy to be with everyone today. Looking at it from the Buffalo-Niagara Partnerships perspective, we are the region's Chamber of Commerce in Buffalo-Niagara and largest privately funded economic development agency. The current status of roads and bridges, not only are there grave safety issues, but they're detriment to private sector investment, especially at a time where there's so much economic uncertainty due to the pandemic. We have seen year after year that deferring the cost of improving roads and bridges just increases that cost and brings with it more safety issues and more of an issue as far as ancillary economic development. So we think that TRIP's report once again offers that comprehensive and needed justification for increased investment in Western New York and throughout New York State. And while TRIP has done this, the report has done this year after year, the difference being this year was with the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, we have an opportunity to advocate for equitable and necessary investment in our roadways, our bridges, and all transit systems. So our hope and what our role will be is to use this report to help make the justification that investment is necessary and will have both positive safety and economic development impacts.
Thank you, Seth. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Rocky. Thank you so much for including AAA in this report. We're pleased to be here today. So, of course, AAA is an advocate for traffic safety. So, first of all, from a safety perspective, AAA's top concern is protecting motorists. So, all motorists deserve safe roads and bridges, while strong infrastructure also has a direct impact on New York's economy. So, today's motorists are saddled with increasing repair and driving costs, even though many people are driving less. AAA research shows that maintenance costs are at least 10 cents a mile on average, aside from the additional costs that TRIP uncovered. So with winter here, we know that when roads begin to thaw in March, pothole issues will arise. AAA calls will increase for tire issues. So consider a pothole encounter. A lot of people consider this minor, but it can actually wreak havoc on car tires, wheels, in suspension systems. And AAA finds that pothole-related repairs can exceed $1,000 in some cases. The average repair cost for a pothole encounter is $306. But even worse, hitting a pothole or taking the wrong measures to overcorrect when you see one coming and a motorist becomes nervous and anxious over seeing that, it could cause a crash and it could cause personal injuries or even worse. The report also looks at congestion. The average price of gas in New York State today is $3.48 a gallon. And ease of congestion and improved mobility would help relieve that burden on motorists who are already feeling that pain at the pump. And AAA has to point out, of course, that we're very pleased that the state legislature has secured record transportation investments and has created many new programs to help support cities across the state in 2022, including Buffalo and Rochester. And the DOT capital plan is at a record level thanks to legislators like Senator Kennedy, who heads up the Transportation Committee. And AAA commends those efforts, and we really hope that more can be done to ensure a collective effort and a unified safety for motorists, because that's what our motorists in New York deserve. We welcome a lot of tourists here. Summer is peak tourism season. They deserve safe roads as well, and we want to impress them when they come to visit us. So AAA does urge lawmakers to continue to prioritize transportation investments to ensure that safe and efficient mobility across the state.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Brad?
Thank you, Robbie, for including FAIR in this wonderful presentation. We always look forward to your guys' data and like to comb through it. We're all on the same page. Infrastructure, safe roads, bridges for commuters, travelers, and as Seth pointed out, for that public-private partnership is so key in growing and revitalizing the Western New York economy. FAIR's been around for about 40 years. We basically advocate for equity and parity between upstate and downstate New York. Upstate New York has 70% of the roads and bridges in New York State, yet receives only 30% of the DOT funding for those resources. So we're always fighting the uphill battle. We want to see things happen throughout the state, and we will continue to fight for that parity. One interesting point that comes out of the most recent TRIP report, when you look at congestion, and where things are going on a both state and federal level with more efficient vehicles and reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. Buffalo stands out right now as having the second worst congestion cost per motorist, only second to that of New York City. And as we all know, those who travel the roads in Western New York, we have some long-term plagued areas around Western New York that FAIR has been working on addressing, specifically with the Thruway Authority, the DOT, and the locals. The two major entities that FAIR has identified, and we've taken a position the last year in going through and working with both the locals, the state, and the Thruway to identify the projects that have either been missed or neglected because so much is driven simply on data on pavement conditions and resurfacing needs and all that. So over the last year, we put together a position paper. It can be found on our website at fairwestnewyork.org. There's over 800 million in total jobs, not including what we define as mega projects. The mega projects are great. They have the ability to revitalize certain portions of New York State and of Western New York, but they take such a big chunk of that DOT budget. Our focus, and they're tough to get done. Our focus is on getting the jobs that we feel can get done in the next 5 years. We've identified over 800 million in jobs that benefit not only the commuter, but will reduce congestion, improve traffic safety, reduce those vehicle operating costs. And the big underlying factor here is that for every dollar, because it's all about economic driver, for every dollar that's spent in infrastructure, there's a return, which is even going to get higher as inflation takes over here, but there's a return of $2 to $4 in economic recovery. So there's a big push to capitalize on the federal infrastructure bill that's been put in place, ensure that state funding, and as Elizabeth pointed out, a big thank you to the state legislators that represent the transportation side of things, specifically Tim Kennedy, for increasing CHIPS funding in the last year. So many locals rely on that CHIPS funding as the main lifeblood to get their roads into better condition. Erie County alone has the largest number of lane miles of any county in New York State, and every year they're simply underfunded and can't keep up with even maintaining their pavement square. So a big thank you to that. We need to continue to increase that CHIPS funding, increase that parity of state funding to federal funding, and then find better ways to get federal funding eligibility into those pots that can do it, specifically the Thruway and the locals. So we'll be continuing to make that push. Like I said, you can find the list of projects, and we'll be continuing to try to get those projects out that help reduce congestion, increase traffic safety, and reduce vehicle operating costs for commuters, travelers, and help the economic prosperity of Western New York.
Thank you, Brad. I'm going to now ask Carolyn Kelly to facilitate any questions that anyone on this Zoom call may have. We'll give you a couple of minutes. You can direct it at anyone on the panel, or just throw it out for the group, and we'll respond as best we can. Carolyn?
Thanks, Rocky. As Rocky noted earlier, you can use either the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen, or you can submit your question via the chat. I'll then be able to elevate anyone with a question to be a panelist so that we'll be able to see you and hear you as you ask your question live of our speakers today. So while we wait for any questions to come in, I'll also note that the full report is available on TRIP's website right now. That's at tripnet, tripnet.org. You'll also be able to find, a recording of this news conference there in about the next half hour or so. So there's also news releases there for each of the specific urban areas that are covered in the report. And if you have any questions, once we wrap up today, Rocky and myself are also available, and we are also happy to put you in touch with any of the panelists. At this point, I don't see any questions that have come in right now. If there are any other last remarks that Rocky, you or any of the speakers would like to make, we could hear those now.
Well, I'll thank our panelists today for taking time out of their schedule, and for everyone who called into today's Zoom. We're certainly available to talk further on this report. But again, I think in light of the additional state money and the additional federal money, it really gives New York State an opportunity to start to address these issues that have been deteriorating over a number of years, And it's going to really be critical moving forward that at the state and local level, that they really make sure that those funds are used in the best way possible and at an adequate level of funding to make the long-term improvements that are really necessary, certainly in Western New York, but really across the state. So again, thanks everyone for participating, and we'll go ahead and end the call now. Thank you.
Thank you.